Hey everybody, welcome back to Still Can't Cook. I am your host, Kelley Fahey. I'm super excited about today's show. Today my guest is 3-time Grammy award-winning producer, renowned photographer, art director, and designer, Mathieu Bitton. I say it, Mathieu Bitton, when I want to sound very French. I'm going to do the show with a French accent because Mathieu Bitton is my guest. Make sure you subscribe, review, and rate. 5 stars, 5 stars. Pretend I'm picking you up. I'm your driver. You want me there quicker. Be nice to me. Give me 5 stars. And I promise I'll give you 5-star back. So let's get to the show. Mathieu Bitton, super excited. Review. Hey everybody, my guest today is Mathieu Bitton. Mathieu, welcome to Still Can't Cook.
What is it called?
Still Can't Cook.
I know.
You're such an
Thanks for having me.
And I said your name correctly.
I thought you said Spokane Cook, and I was like, oh, I didn't know you were
Still
from
Can't
Spokane.
Cook.
No, I know.
Spokane.
Thanks for having me.
How did you think I said it?
Spokane Cook.
Spokane Cook.
Like
no, Still
Spokane.
Can't Cook. Like what? Like Spokane?
Spokane, like the place.
Washington?
Was it Spokane? Or
Spokane.
Oh, Spokane. Okay.
You're
Still
French.
can't cook. Okay.
It's okay. I said Mathieu Bitton for a minute.
Apparently, I still can't pronounce.
It probably sounds better in French. But anyway, so welcome here. I'm really glad to have you. You and I have known each other. Thank you for coming. And it's raining and shitty, and you're still here, so I really appreciate it. We have known each other for a while.
Yep.
And I start every show with how we met, and if you remember our first meeting or any specific time of our long-going relationship.
So I remember coming to the Soho Grand in 2016 with the Chappelles.
Okay.
And this woman comes up to me. She's like, "Who the fuck are you?"
Was that me?
And that was you.
No, I did not. Seriously?
Maybe you didn't say, "Who the fuck are you?" You said, "Who are you?"
What was going on? What was the...
I think because I was trying to get up to their suite or something like that, and Elaine said,
Wait,
like,
makes
ask
way
for
more
Kelley.
sense now.
Elaine said, like, ask for Kelley or something like that. I don't remember the exact, but it was at the Soho Grand. And then we all went to Blue Ribbon Brasserie. I think the first time I hung with Dave in New York, probably. And then we all came back the following year for the whole Radio City Music Hall. And then that's when I started seeing you regularly.
So mine is different. I remember meeting you at an event. Now tell me if I'm wrong. Didn't I meet you first? Did you go to an event prior with Carla and Fred? Because I feel like I met you kind of in the back of the house. I didn't know you yet. You were definitely taking pictures. But it was like a bunch of people.
Was it a Dave thing? Or?
I think it was a Dave thing. It wasn't like a huge...
In New York?
In New York.
I think I met you before that. I think you're thinking of that underground club after SNL, right? 2016?
Okay, so we had dinner before that. So maybe my memory sucks.
But I could be wrong because my memory also sucks.
Yeah, I think that we met at a venue because it was like the first time you got up and you took pictures and you went off, like we were all kind of sitting together. It might not have been New York now that I'm thinking about, because we were side stage and we were sitting in the bleachers, and we were in a weird spot. It wasn't a very good view of the stage. Okay. And Carla and Fred were there, and I was with Derek was there.
Okay.
And you got up.
D-Nice?
And you went up and you got up and you started taking, like you walked away with them and took pictures, and we met like briefly, but I remember you having the camera and being like, oh, who's this guy?
This is like a terrible remembrance of like, how did we meet?
First of all, stop the show. We don't even know each other. Who is this guy?
Okay.
The other thing I remember, and one memory that really stands out with you, is that you happened to work with Lenny Kravitz and are very good friends with Lenny Kravitz, and I have a family member connection with Lenny, and you and I were alone and we were having lunch or something at the Soho Grand.
Oh yeah.
And it came up in
FaceTimed, I think.
And we FaceTimed. Either he called
he FaceTimed me, and then you were like, oh my God, I know him. Yeah.
And it was crazy because he remembered. That memory was, I met the man once, but because of the family connection, and he immediately said their names and asked her where they were. But that's when I was like, oh,
it's like the Kevin connection, right?
We can cut that. Cut that name. Kidding, you can leave it if you want to. But yeah, it's one of the things that's, with you that's been interesting is that as much as I do know you, there's so much that I didn't know about you, and one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on the show. But then I started to read up on you, and now I'm kind of like, a little bit like,
starstruck?
A little time. I mean, there's photographers, and then there's being like a legendary part of some of the greatest moments in entertainment, and being in the rooms with people who you can't get in rooms with. Like it's, I'm kind of, it took me back that I was like, we'll get back to questions. You don't have the pretension that your resume would imply you should. Does that make sense?
Well, yeah, because it's funny, my friend Jeff Aroff, who's a great record executive, art director, mentor used to call me Zelig, you know, because they always say like, you're always in the place. Like, it's like that movie, that Woody Allen movie, Zelig, you know, where he's everywhere. It's like Forrest Gump kind of, you know, but pre Forrest Gump. Brilliant movie. You should watch it. And I have felt a lot of times like people are saying, like, oh my God, this night in New York happened. And I was like, oh yeah, I was there.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't believe there's a night where, like, you know, Miles Davis showed up at this club in Paris, and oh yeah, I was there. You know, and it's just a kind of a weird, I see it as sort of as a part of my fate. Like, I was actually meant to be in these moments, and at a certain point I would start capturing these moments. Like, a lot of these moments, I was a kid, or, you know, I wasn't working, I wasn't I wasn't a photographer yet. I started as a designer, graphic designer, really young, just because I wanted to design like Prince bootlegs, you know, and I taught myself how to do it. But capturing, you know, these moments, it kind of came later naturally, because it's like, oh, well, I'm there anyway, you know, and I should capture this. But a lot of times it's to the point where people like he's making this stuff up. There's no way he was at all these places.
Oh no, he was. Google.
And you know, there was I had a high school friend who, you know, was a good friend, but he kind of always had that like jealousy thing where, like, because for some reason I would end up in, you know, the right place at the right time, which is what I mean by the fate thing.
But I mean legendary places. It's not.
Yeah, but sometimes it did feel like I'm not always trying to get to these places. Like, I'll go to a regular place, and this guy walks, you know what I mean? Like, holy shit. Like, I remember going to see the movie Soap Dish. I go to the theater in Westwood in LA. This was like high school days. And, you know, everybody knows I'm a big Prince fan and all that. And like, all of a sudden, my friend Gil Kalintursky, who changed his name to Gil Kinnan when he became American, was a high school friend who introduced me to my ex, my baby mama, Rebecca. In high school, he and I went to see this movie Soap Dish in Westwood, and like, we're sitting in the second to last row, and like, we're just sitting there, and all of a sudden there's like a commotion behind me, and I turn around, and Prince and his bodyguards walk in to watch the movie, and I'm like, and he's sitting directly behind me, and I'm like, everybody, you know, I'm like a big Prince fan.
So he's a huge.
And you know, who's ever seen Prince in a movie theater?
Nobody.
Like, that doesn't exist, you know. And I'm like, I turn back to Gil, I'm like, holy shit. This,
you must have been, how old were you?
And I had met Prince by that point.
Oh, you had
as
met
a kid.
Okay,
yeah, because I had met him in Paris as a kid. I mean, you know, as a teenager at a nightclub. And I know that sounds funny, because what the fuck is are we allowed to curse on the podcast?
Yes, it's my podcast.
It's your podcast, yeah. That would be
very
so
few words
hypocritical.
spoken without a fucking my podcast.
You know, a lot of times my whole path has been that thing of like me at that internal conversation of what the fuck and how the fuck, like, how is this possible? You know, I'm a big fan of the whole 70s blaxploitation movement. I've been collecting the stuff since I was a kid, the posters, you know, and I swear it's like a destiny thing. Like, I was at Whole Foods one day, and I'm sitting behind this gentleman who's got like this safari hat on top of this grayish, you know, graying afro, and he's wearing this really cool coat. And I'm behind him in line, like, I don't know who it is.
Yeah.
And suddenly I'm like, that's Max Julian, you know, who's the Mac, and also wrote Cleopatra Jones and Thomasine and Bushrod, a lot of classics. But he's the Mac, he's Goldie, you know, a famous character that influenced the whole hip hop generation. I mean, literally, everybody was trying to be Goldie, and
he's got the fish shoes.
No, that's Antonio Fargas.
Okay. I knew you'd know.
That's Huggy Bear from Starsky and Hutch.
Yeah.
That's the movie I'm Gonna Get You Sucker that you're talking about. But that's inspired, you know, from that. Like. That's a spoof on the Mac, so you're not totally off. You're referring to the reference.
Thank you.
And I don't know why I can't see the guy's face. I can't see, you know, but something tells me that's the Mac. That's Goldie, you know. And so I kind of like, he gets up to like pay for groceries and turns sideways. I'm like, Mr. Julian, you know, and he's like, who's asking, you know? And he was the most, like, one of the most introverted actors, writers, producers. You know, people knew you don't. This guy just doesn't really fuck with people.
Right.
And for some reason, I started talking to him and say, you know, hey man, I collect your posters and I have all this memorabilia and da da da. And he was kind of like, yeah, I've been conned before, you know. And I'm like, well, I'm not trying to con you.
Right.
I you know. He said, what do you want, man? What do you want from me? Like, I don't have anything to get. You know, I was like, no, I'm not trying to get anything from you. I'm kind of like starstruck right now. I'm just trying to say hello. And he was like, you don't know who I am. I was like, Max Julien? He's like, well, you probably saw that on my, on my wallet or credit card or something. I was like, man, you really think I'm trying to con you? He's like, man, what do you want? I was like, I just want to tell you that you're a great inspiration and that I'm a huge fan of your work. And, I just had to say something. And somebody kind of like, he was like, okay, what do you got? I was like, well, I've got Italian posters for the Mac that you've probably never seen. And we just started having this conversation. And he's like, give me your phone number, man. And, I'm like, okay. And he leaves and he called me and we became friends. And I would go over to his place and show him my posters. And one day when Miles was very little, he actually even came over to our house, and this was a very reclusive character, a very reclusive guy. And to the point that one day he gave me his phone number. This is probably, he used to call me from a block number. And you didn't call Max Julien. Right. And every birthday he would call me like, hey, man, it's Max. I'm thinking of you. I love you. Did you see the
collection? Did you get to show him your stuff?
I got to show him some of the collection. And then the greatest thing for me was he never really broke. The Mac, I guess, was kind of based on his, his own.
Who he is,
his character. I believe, his mother was killed in front of him. It was like some intense stuff that happened when he was a kid. And all that kind of coming from Iceberg Slim, that's the genesis of that whole movement. And so one day he's like, hey, let's have lunch today. I want to see you. I miss you. Like, he was a really sweet guy. And people didn't believe me when I would meet other actors, that I'd say, oh yeah, I'm friends with Max Julien. They're like, Max Julien doesn't have any friends, So I meet him at this restaurant, Hugo's, in LA. This is the one in Studio City. And, he came by the house, saw the kids, including the 25-year-old that's sitting across from us. And then we go to Hugo's, and I had found a dealer who had bought a theater in Cairo. The guy had bought an old movie theater that had been closed down since like 1981 or something. And he bought all of the posters that were in the basement. And in that, and I met the guy in Paris, and he says, oh, I just bought like 100,000 posters. And I said, listen, if there's any black film titles, I'm buying them all. Like, I just want them all. And he says, yeah, there's, Pam Grier, Sheba Baby. And he says, and I think there's one for the Mac. And I was like, oh my God. and he says, as a matter of fact, there's 2 copies. And probably a year later, I get them from him. And I get him linen backed, which is the restoration, and put on linen. And then I meet Max for... it was around his birthday, and I had this tube with me. We're just having lunch because it's now a rolled linen back poster. Just talking, and at one point I said, "Hey man, I brought you something, because you're always calling me on my birthday, and he was like, what?" And I just open up this Egyptian poster, and it's completely.
I mean, that's insane.
It's completely insane. It's like the scene. The Egyptians used to make these movie posters with. No matter what the movie was about, it could be Casablanca. Humphrey Bogart would have a machine gun on it, like stuff that was not in the movie. Like literally Gone with the Wind, the poster is like people on the boat with bazookas, you know what I mean, with the actors. And on the poster for the Mac, it's Richard Pryor and Max Julien, because Richard Pryor is in the Mac famously. And Willie Hutch did the music, which has been sampled by a million hip hop artists, like that song, I Choose You. And anyway, so the poster is Richard Pryor, Max Julien with Uzis shooting up at the sky, which does not happen in the movie. It's a movie about pimps.
That's fantastic.
And even, we talk like in Chappelle's show, the whole pimp, skit, that's all the Mac, because they have the Mac of the Year contest in the movie. And that's a real thing that used to happen in Chicago. They would literally have an award show.
The Pimp of the Year.
Pimp, right? But it's the Mac of the Year. Okay. That's how the term the Mac comes from that. So I gave him this poster. The guy starts crying at the table. I'm like,
wow.
The guy who's tough and never breaks character. And I was kind of uncomfortable because, and he was like, man, this is crazy. He had never seen it, obviously, because it's an Egyptian poster. Like, there's no reason he would have seen it. And then he was like, take my number. It was like the first time he gave me his phone number after like probably a couple years of knowing him, And he said, you're the seventh person to get my phone number. And I'm like, what? And he was that guy. And then he gave me his book, Dark Clowns on it, he signed, to young genius Matthew. I'm like, well, I'm no genius, but Max Julian just called me, the whole experience was crazy. And that started, I'm using that example, but that started happening,
Is that when you decided, like, what moment was like, I want to be a photographer? Like, were these moments like, you got to catch the shit?
No, this stuff is all...
Prior.
This is all prior. This is all like my passion kind of becoming reality, like realizing that all these things I'd been collecting, records and posters and all this stuff for my whole...
How did that start? How did you get into
Well, I grew up in Paris. I used to go to flea markets, which I still go to every time I'm there, the Paris flea markets. And my dad was an art collector.
But black art and culture?
When I was born, literally, it took me a long time to realize the connection, but both of my parents had a lot of art featuring Josephine Baker. It was like a thing. Mm-hmm. And now I have a lot of art, original like 1920s and 30s sculptures and paintings, posters of Josephine Baker and that whole era. Paul Colin, the French artist who famously did it's Revue Nègre. It's like a Negro review, I guess, from the 20s. And it's all these very famous paintings.
So it was
and he would do, like Josephine Baker was performing, the poster would be done by this guy, Paul Colin.
Right.
And it was also the kind of start, where in that era, anytime a black person was depicted, it was caricature. Mm-hmm. They couldn't just paint a black person, everything had to be with the bigger lips and the bigger nose and stuff. And this is the movement that kind of started taking it to art. It was still dramatic because it's Art Deco, mm-hmm. So even the white person on the poster would have the larger features and stuff, but it wasn't, the caricature. And this stuff as a kid really attracted me. I thought it was beautiful, and I was obsessed with Josephine Baker. I have a Josephine Baker tattoo. And so that's kind of how that started. And I just started, collecting posters, and I started becoming obsessed with, I would say, African-American cinema, but it's not. It's actually like black cinema throughout the world. Mm-hmm. And like Black Orpheus, which is a French, Portuguese, French-Brazilian production, was like changed my life, that movie. And just seeing the Rio and the dancers and the music and the Antonio Carlos Jobim soundtrack,
And you were super young when it started.
Yeah, we're talking when I'm like 7.
Am I correct that you started, was Prince Memorabilia first? Or was
That's later.
That was later.
Not too much later.
Okay.
Paul Robeson, Showboat, like all that whole movement of cinema, even Oscar Michaud film, things that no white Jewish kid in Paris should even know.
Yeah.
But my dad used to kind of turn me on to this stuff, and a lot of it was because he was out a lot. And so when, I was going between my parents, because they split up when I was like 2, I don't remember them together, but... Well, I remember them coming together when they were already, mm-hmm. divorced or separated. But what I realized is my dad was he was a big socialite in Paris, and he was out to all the popular clubs every night, and he knew everybody. Funny enough, he knew like the comedians, he knew the musicians, not too dissimilar from my life now.
Right.
But he was just, he was a fashion designer, but he was just always the life of the party. And what I realized is he used to go out at night. And so he knew I'm not going to go to sleep, when he leaves, because he would go to dinner then he would go to, the Les Bandouches is a big nightclub in Paris, and he would go to this other club called the Bus Palladium, and he would go to the Apocalypse, which was the other. There were like 3 clubs that anybody who was like in Paris would be at those clubs. Only one survives today, the Bandouche, but it's changed a lot. It's been relaunched. It's not as cool as it used to be. No offense to the Bandouche, but when I was a kid, that was the spot. And so what my dad would do, which is all like I'm realizing that now at 52, is he would say, "Oh, put a VCR, let me put a VHS in the VCR, and here's a couple movies or whatever." And that was babysitting. Instead of getting a babysitter. I had my sister, but my sister would lock herself up with her thick glasses and just read books, for like 1,000-page books. And it drove me crazy because I needed attention. Mm. So what I used to do with my sister that got her attention is I ripped the last page of all her books. So when she would get to page 1,006 or whatever, she wants to read Anna Karenina or something, and then it's like
the tail end is gone.
Like a Tolstoy novel where it's just like Dostoevsky, and it's just like a nightmare of complications, and you get to the last page and see what happened, and the last page is gone.
That's fantastic.
So she used to beat the shit out of me because
well-deserved beating.
And so that didn't work. She kept reading her book, so I stopped ripping the last pages, but the movies became my thing. So that's how I would end. But back in those days, it's not like streaming now. You can watch 5 million movies on demand. We probably had like 20 movies. So the fact that we had Black Orpheus, and there was also stuff on TV. There was 3 channels when I was a kid. TF1 was the French, first channel, Antenne 2, which means Antenna 2. And FR3, that's the 3 channels we had.
3 channels.
So there would be movies on at night. So it was either I'm replaying That Man from Rio, the Belmondo movie for the 100th time. There's like literally I would watch the movies 100 times. And so that's how I discovered all this stuff. Phantom of the Paradise, which is a big one for me. It's probably my favorite movie of all time.
I have to write it down. It's all
and I'm working on a big project on that right now. But that's all because of absentee parenting,
It's a good latchkey story.
I mean, listen, I might be, looking back like, damn, I wish, I had a little more, like a little more presence. And at the same time, I don't want my life to be any different than it was. So I kind of can't.
It's a culture and an art. I mean, I just know from seeing your Instagram and, just stories, and now that I've Googled. It's incredible, the collection and the history, and if that ever turned, and obviously it dictated your art and where you ended up, and like the course of your life and your now photography, which we didn't still get to. When did you start taking pictures? I
mean, photography was a hobby for a long time. Like, so my godfather in Paris, I talk about this in my Paris Blues book.
Okay.
My godfather, whose name is Gerard Darel, he's a famous designer as well, because the whole, all my dad's friends, everybody was fashion, more like retail, not like haute couture, And Gerard Darel was a Leica collector, like obsessed with Leicas, and my whole childhood, all the photos of me are shot by this guy on Leicas. Never thought about it.
Talk about meant to be situations.
By the way, I've never thought about that till right this moment.
Okay.
That's crazy. So
you heard it here first.
Yeah. He had a Leica M4 and a Leica M3, and later on a Leica M6, which I've never thought about until right now. That's crazy.
That's awesome.
Wow. That's kind of emotional.
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. It's crazy because I'm like hearing the Leica 100 celebration. I know, he's the guy who put the first Leica in my hand, but how have I not thought about the fact that the pictures of me are shot on these cameras? So he was like because we were always together, he was sort of like the family photographer. But at one point he gave me this Leica camera, Leica Flex camera, and it was funny because I kept taking pictures with it and the rolls were blank, and I was like, oh my god, I'm a terrible photographer, blah, blah, blah. And I brought it back to him, and he brought it over to Leica, a repair shop or something, and they said there's nothing we can do. And then long story short, somebody was like, it's missing the battery. There's no battery in it, so the camera was fine. But so I used to take pictures of my friends. I was in boarding school from the age of 10 to 14. Once my mom moved to the States, we moved in with my dad, who was like, I can't I can't deal with like kids full time. Like it was one thing when we went between my mom's and my dad's, but he had a friend named Philip de Henning, who was another designer, who was also a Formula One racer. And he knew that his daughters were in boarding school. And he was also like a major Scientologist. First time I ever heard of Scientology was this guy, Philip de Henning. Yeah. So they always had like weird, like kind of cultish vibes,
They sure do.
But I didn't really understand it. But we used to spend all our weekends at this guy's place. And
Dianetics was all over the house?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they tried to get me into that, but that was not my thing. But so this guy's like, oh, my daughters are in this Waldorf boarding school, this Rudolf Steiner boarding school, and it's like 2 hours north of Paris. You should put your kids there. So my dad's like, I'm not going to mess up my social life, by suddenly having to have 2 kids. So this is a true story. One day he was like, hey, we're going to go visit this school, right? It's a boarding school. And I was like, I don't want to go to boarding school. Like, that's scary. I don't want to do that, And he was like, well, we're just going to check it out, just be open-minded and, because I have to travel, and my mom was then in the States.
Just in case.
Right. And then just in case, pack a suitcase.
No, he didn't.
And I'm like, well, why are we packing a suitcase to go see a place? We get there, and he's like, meets with the teachers or whatever, and he's like, okay, great. All right, guys. Well, I'll see you next week. And it's like, I don't want to. I remember crying all night. You know what I mean? I
want to cry right now
because I was 10. So that's pretty young. I might have
your father on this when we have to talk to him about. Does he know he was wrong?
My dad's got Alzheimer's now, conveniently. Okay. But I've talked to him about it. When he still could be accountable.
I mean, as a parent yourself, looking.
But my dad's hilarious. He's one of the funniest people I've ever known. Dave met him. My dad was like, "I did it all so you would be successful." He said, it's all part of. He said it was all part of the plan. I knew that if I was too present, you would never make it.
This episode of Still Can't Cook is brought to you by BetterHelp. The sun is out, the birds are chirping, and apparently that means you're supposed to be thriving. Yeah, no pressure, right? Everything's blooming, the days are longer, your friends are all doing sunset Pilates. Meanwhile, you're like, I'm just trying not to spiral today. Just because the season is changing does not mean that everything in your life magically gets easier. In fact, sometimes spring brings more pressure. To feel good, to do more, to be more. And that's why Mental Health Awareness Month is such a great reminder. Taking care of your mental health is not seasonal, it's essential. Whether you're feeling stuck, overwhelmed, or just want someone to talk to, therapy can always help. BetterHelp has been connecting people to licensed therapists for over 10 years, with a network of over 30,000 providers. It's all online, designed to fit into your life. You can do your sessions on the phone, video, or even just on chat. And if your first therapist just doesn't feel like the right fit, you can switch at any time with no extra cost. So if spring feels like pressure instead of peace, just know that help is there. We're all better with help. Visit BetterHelp.com today to get 10% off of your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/cook. Now let's get back to the show.
So we're in this boarding school all of a sudden, and it's a weird boarding school because it's I don't know if you're familiar with the Waldorf, but it's a really great system of like child-led education. There's no textbooks. You make your own textbooks. You draw your own textbooks. It really teaches people to be extremely creative because all of a sudden, geography, you draw the global map. You make a globe. It's pretty amazing. But when you're 10 years old, and you're used to being in Paris and walking around and with the Walkman, listening to music and
watching the same movie 100 times.
Yeah, you don't really suddenly want to be in the countryside somewhere with cows and weirdos, know. And our teachers, who they called educators, they didn't call themselves teachers, where we had one that was for the boys and one that was for the girls. It was mixed, So I started really rebelling because I didn't want to be there. And so I, started doing some pretty crazy stuff. The craziest was probably one time they were building some new homes or something in a big field that turns out used to be a cemetery in the 1700s.
Oh, Jesus.
So I went out at night and found a bunch of human bones and put them in the teachers' beds. The educators' beds and the girls' dorms. We put all these bones in there. So I kept doing stuff that would get me in trouble. And all I wanted was to be kicked out of the school. I was trying whatever I could.
Oh, nowadays you would have been tossed the first.
Forget. I mean, some of the stuff I did.
It's also illegal to desecrate a.
Yeah, but it wasn't. It was already becoming a construction site.
All of a sudden, cut to the cops breaking in.
But I mean, I did set fire to the dorm. I mean, I was not necessarily trying to burn the dorm down, but this guy had this poster and it was driving me crazy. It was like some. You
were already an art snob.
I think it was like a James Dean giant poster. Yeah. We weren't allowed any media or anything, and this guy put up a poster or something. I don't remember if it was that. In my memory right now, it was like a Belgian. And I don't know if you know anything about French Belgian, but you know how Americans have the Polak jokes or whatever, which I don't even think you're supposed to say that word anymore. Polish jokes. Polish. France was the Belgians, and this guy was Belgian, and he was the stereotypical Belgian from the jokes.
Got it.
I was so tired of this poster that I just to be funny, I had a match and I lit the poster on fire, not thinking that next to the poster was the curtain.
Okay.
And so the whole thing started. The poster caught on fire, the curtain caught on fire.
And still not thrown out of school.
Huh?
You're still not.
I still didn't get, but I did get.
Jeez Louise.
I did get detention, and the detention was that I had to knit new curtains, not cut and sew curtains. I had to knit new curtains, which are probably still in that school to this day. And I made some badass fucking
You actually did
curtains.
it?
Yeah, and you know what? Everything that I hated about a boarding school, I've done so much with. Or something breaks, I'm like, oh, I can fix that. I can sew that, you know. And like Grace is always like, I can't believe you know how to do this stuff. And
my
like
God.
boarding school, I was forced to because I was such a jackass. But I also love design, so I used to see all these photos and the perfect culmination of everything I love was albums, you know, vinyl records. So at the flea market, I used to, from the time I was 11, I worked in clothing stores. I would work in there was a friend of my dad's had a company called Bruce Fields, like a men's like suits and stuff in Paris, and they were all over Paris. So I started working every weekend and vacations. I would work in those stores. And the guy who owned the brand, my dad ended up opening one of the stores at Bastille. So I would kind of go between, you know, all the different stores. Actually, the very first store I worked at was Place des Innocents in Léal, which is where the very first Cost.
I know what L'Oreal is.
The Cost, you know, is now like Hotel Cost.
Yeah.
It's kind of cool because there was the store was next to the first Cost Cafe that Philippe Starck designed, and that was the very first thing that blew them all up. Like Cost, Philippe Starck, everybody was next to where I was working at 11, you know. And this guy who owned the brand, a completely crazy guy, still around, and he's nuts, this Richard Liani guy. And one day said, this has nothing to do with photography, but one day said, hey, I found out the manager of the store, her name was Claude, which is weirdly a man's name, but I've met several women named Claude. I found out she stole from the register, so today when you get into work, you have to fire her. I think I was 12, and he's like, I want you to fire her today. And I'm like, I can't fire an adult, like a 40-year-old woman, you know? And he actually made me do it. And I remember I was like devastated because she's like, you little shit. And I was like, Mr. Liani said I had to tell you know, boarding school, I used to love documenting my friends, you know, so either writing little anecdotes, taking photos, and little by little, I just started loving photography. And then when I moved to New York in the 90s, 92 to go to NYU, I became roommates with photographers. That used to be like the thing, and they were all great photographers. And I like photography, but I didn't know like the technicality of it, you know. So I didn't think I could do it like these guys. And these guys were, you know, doing a lot of. I mean, my apartment on 26th Street was literally like a elite. You know, would send the models to do their test shoots with this roommate of mine, who was like the typical French, you know, kind of pervy. Yeah. maybe he'll watch this, but you know. So I actually kind of lost the taste for photography from just seeing that world of the modeling and the fashion and kind of how gross it all was. I just decided, you know, I'm just going to do this as a hobby, and I became a successful graphic designer and art director. Started doing a lot of album covers and packaging and movie posters and whatever else.
Which is crazy because that's how it all started visually for you.
Right. All with the graphic design. And then what started happening is I would take photos of bands, like all my friends. I had a lot of musician friends, and they would say, oh man, you know, I can't afford to blah, blah, blah. Can you shoot my thing? Oh, can you design my record? And I was like, well, hey, I'll take the photos too, you know? And so probably like early 2000s, I started doing and they were all like really talented musicians. And like my friend Chris Pierce, who's he's like Otis Redding. He's amazing. And I started doing all his records. And then there was like a friend, Shane Alexander, and my friend Trevor Manier, who also managed, like he's in Dawes now. But, you know, like it would be all these friends of mine, and I would just do everything. I would do the design, I would shoot the photos, I would do the music videos, I would do the documentary, the BTS, and then became kind of a thing. And then people like Jeff Aroff, who I mentioned in the beginning, who used to be the head of Virgin Records, Warner Brothers Records, A&M Records, I'm creative director at A&M. He was like, you took these pictures? Hey, come shoot this album cover, you know? And so people like him, mainly Jeff, you know, would be like, hey, you can do it all. Why don't you just do it all? And then Lenny, who you mentioned, you know, we had been, friends since I was a teenager, but he started seeing the stuff I was doing. And at one point was like, Oh, we were getting together about, because I was working on Marvin Gaye box sets and reissues and Stevie Wonder and.
Do you hear yourself talking?
No, I know, but it was like all the stuff that I collected, and that's what I was talking about, the Destiny
Talk about
thing.
powerful dreamer, right? I mean, literally, this is
insane. And I had all these collections, and the labels I would meet the people from the record labels because somebody would say, hey, we're doing a reissue of this rare soundtrack, and nobody had a copy. And somebody would say, well, my friend Matthew has a mint sealed copy of that soundtrack in his apartment on 26th Street. So I got a call, this guy, Harry Weinger, who's like, hey, I hear you have these things. Can you come over? It was through Lisa Cortez, who directed their Little Richard documentary recently, who's an amazing woman. And at the time, she had a label called Loose Cannon, and I had met her. It's like all these steps. But it started with my collection, which came from my passion. And then I reached out to Lenny Kravitz.
Shut up.
And I said, hey, Lenny Kravitz, it's Mathieu Bitton. So I said, hey, it's the 20th of Let Love Rule. What are you doing? And he's like, oh, we're going to do a tour and some other stuff around the anniversary. And I said, well, you got to do like a deluxe edition of the album. That's the stuff I work on, be it James Brown, Marvin Gaye, or Roy Ayers, or Stevie Wonder. Like, I've been doing all this stuff, and he knew I was working on all this stuff. And I'd been doing these amazing deluxe editions of all the Marvin Gaye albums that my friend Harry Weinger, who I mentioned, was producing. At the time, he was managed by Gary Gersh, who I'd worked with. I designed some of his logos and stuff. We used to work with Beastie Boys and Capitol Records. And Noah Gersh, his son, who ended up doing the Chappelle podcast, and the Midnight Miracle. So everything's all completely connected. And so he says, oh, call Gary. So I call Gary, holy shit, I can't believe you're working with Lenny. And so long story short, he's like, go to the Bahamas. It was like January or February 2009, because the anniversary was coming up that summer. And Lenny gave me access to, all his master tapes, so I could do what I do and listen to all the stuff and find outtakes and find, alternate versions. And I put this 2 CD thing together. And while I was in the Bahamas, working on that, he was working on a new album. And I remember bringing a still camera and like a little video camera, because I'm going to the Bahamas, I gotta like film and take some photos and stuff. And he had our dear friend Shannon Brock, who he went to Santa Monica junior high with, and we've known Shannon forever. And Shannon was documenting, I guess. But that day, for some reason, Shannon was like chilling on the beach or something, and Lenny starts coming up with this song called Push, which ended up, at the time, I think he was writing for, it was for a movie, maybe it was Precious, I think.
Okay.
And so he's working on this thing. Yeah, I think it was for Lee Daniels. And so I'm like, oh, this is cool. And so I'm like, hey, can I film? He's like, yeah, film this, because I'm going to want to like, So I start filming it. At one point, like, Shannon walks back in like 2 hours later. I've been filming for 2 hours. He came up with the song. And then I think I have footage of Lenny saying, look at the white man taking the job from Shannon or something like that. And from that moment on, he was like, hey, do you want to come to, we're doing these shows in New York. So he does Irving Plaza, when it was the Fillmore, like they had converted it to the Fillmore.
That's a great venue, by the way.
Yeah, it's a great venue. So he said, hey, if you want to come to the show, and I had done the merch for the Irving Plaza. So by that point, I'm now designing stuff for Lenny.
Okay.
And we had been talking for probably a decade about me doing some stuff, but it just never
visual.
happened.
Everything's
all visual, graphic design, art direction, all stuff. But I'm not shooting yet with Lenny. I'm shooting my friends and other people. And
you're quietly judging the photographer off the side?
No, because I kind of felt like, I'd love to do this, but, it's not my job,
Right.
And so I remember, incidentally, my friend Jesse Froman, who we just came from having lunch with, who is an amazing photographer. His most famous work is the last Kurt Cobain, the last Nirvana shoot with the white glasses, everybody knows, but used to assist Irving Penn for 4 years. His stuff is amazing. And he was like, oh, I'd love to like shoot Lenny or something. So I was like, yeah, I'll hook you up. And I hooked him up. And then my friend Roxanne Lewitt, who I dedicated this book to, was like, oh, can I come shoot the show? And it was like, everybody was asking me if they could come photograph Lenny. And I was hooking it up happily. And then there was a moment, it was on I think the second night of the Irving Plaza, it was 5 nights, where I remember just, having the eureka moment. I keep doing this thing where I'm like pushing for other people to do the things that I know I could do. You know, I'm like going out of my way to like hook people up. And I've been doing that my whole life with in any way, whether it be personal or work or, you know, and often finding that when I would ask somebody for a favor or something,
that doesn't work the same way.
They just never responded or they never, you know. So it was, I think the third night, I said to Lenny, maybe it was the fourth night even, I don't know, I said to him, hey, do you mind if I take pictures tonight? He's like, oh, you take pictures? I'm like, I mean, it's just for fun. I'll just take some pictures, and if you don't mind. And he's like, yeah, you know, feel you're at home, do whatever you want. Great show. And after the show, we got on the tour bus. He lived on Crosby Street at the time. I remember going from Irving Plaza to Crosby Street on the tour bus, which is kind of funny because it takes a lot of room. It's not easy to get to. And I think he was at 30 Crosby at the time, and on the bus he's like, oh, let me see the pictures. I'm like, no, I gotta edit them, I gotta like develop them, you know what I mean, I have to like make them look good. And he's like, no, fuck that, let me see the camera. And I literally, he's like yanking the camera out of my hands, you know, and he looks on the back of the camera and he's like scrolling, and I'm mortified because I'm like, well, that was a great first and last time I'll ever photograph Lenny. And he's looking at it and he's like very silent, you know? So I'm like, oh my God, this is so embarrassing. Like, I don't even get to like fix the colors and contrast and all this stuff. And then he goes, Craig, who's Craig Ross, his guitar player, he calls Craig, who comes out of the, you know, back of the bus, and he's like, look at these pictures. And Craig's like super mellow always. So he's looking at it, he's like, oh, that's cool. That's cool. I like this one. That's cool. And then Craig goes back, and then Lenny looks at me. He's like, "What did you say you're doing tomorrow?" I said, "I'm flying back to LA because And he's like, "You're coming to Europe with us." And I was like, "What?" He's like, "Yeah, you're coming to Europe." He's like, "These are amazing. I want you to shoot the tour." You know, and I'm like, "No, I'm not set up for that. Like, I don't have the right gear. I don't have, you know." And he's like, fuck that, this is fine, you're coming, and you're coming to Italy, so pack your suitcase, and we're going to Milan or Rome tomorrow. And so I'm like, let me call Rebecca at home and be like, you okay if I disappear?
2 kids already?
Two kids,
boys?
Miles and Julian at the time.
Miles and Julian.
So, yeah, you know, that's kind of crazy.
It's incredible. I have a question about this, though. Do you think, because I was going to go there, but now that we're talking about it, you lived with photographers, you know a lot of photographers. Do you think that photography can be taught, or do you think that this is actually something that you're born with, an eye that you're born with? I know your son, Miles, is following your footsteps. He's taking up photography. I don't know if it was something you pushed on him or something that was just always there. But do you think it's innately in you? Yeah,
to answer the first question, I think everything can be taught. I think skills can be taught.
Yes.
I don't think the eye, the talent, you know,
I don't think so
perception, either. I don't think can be taught. I think instinct can't be, you know, you have instinct. I don't think it can be taught. And Miles definitely has that eye, you know, and it's practice makes perfect kind of thing. I mean, Miles started assisting me at like 12 or 13 years old. He got a Leica in his hand at like 15 or something, right? Some 15, 16 years old. So they're not easy cameras to use. So he also learned by practice. But I think for me, you know, there's much better technical photographers than I could ever be that I know, you know.
Really?
But, oh, absolutely. But I don't know that matters as much in the kind of work that I do. You know, I'm not trying to do the tequila ad you know, I mean, great. I wouldn't mind Louis Vuitton billboard or something.
Right.
That's all like 25 people on the photo shoot doing. I work alone. I have Miles, you know, sometimes assisting me. Most of the time I work alone. And so I don't have the luxury of these, you know, glitzy, crazy 20 light photo shoots, you know. I do it if I get that job, you know. But
do you think that you could, like, did you ever think of doing a mentorship on how you do it, on your type of photography?
I don't think I could teach it.
You can't teach it.
I mean, I could do masterclass. I mean, I've done it, and they're asking me to do more. I can definitely share my experience, which I think would be the way I would do it. Share, yes, I'll show you some technical things that work for me, but I'm not going to be like, I'm not trying to be like Mr. like, this is, you know, I see the kind of photography that I'm into kind of like jazz, you know, like, so you have like the super strict Miles Davis, like Juilliard kind of like learn everything by the book. And then at some point you go off with On the Corner, Bitches Brew, all that, Feed the Kilimanjaro, all these like crazy records. But everything for a long time is just a perfection.
Rhythm, yeah.
Everything can be taught, but when you kind of go off into your thing, that is just who you are, and that's what makes people special. It works in music and certain actors and painters, and so there's part of me that still sees photography as a minor art, and I see painting, classical music as a art majeur, a major
Really?
art. I still see like the little bit of like, well, I mean, we have these cameras that kind of do the thing for us, and we press a button, and yes, you have to know, part of me still has a little bit of that, because I could never be, Lucien Freud, or, I could never paint like that. Like I can.
Are you sure?
I can
It
doodle.
seems like you can do all the other visuals. Have you tried painting?
I mean, I have,
Okay.
I don't know.
I'm rooting for you.
No, I appreciate it. I would love to learn that skill, but I don't think I have that thing. I can't get on the piano and play like Art Tatum,
Right.
or Bach. So it's like or Beethoven, So there's definitely part of me that sees it as a challenge to keep like wanting to do like more and more abstract stuff, because then I see that it becomes more of an art,
Okay.
But I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. I'm just saying that I don't see myself as having that kind of talent.
I get it.
There's just so many incredible photographers that have come before me. So I just try to like do my own thing and not worry about the burden of being great or anything
There's just
like
classes for me, like, seeing your art, sorry, it is an art, seeing your photos, and really like taking more time to look through them more intensely. I remember at one point, it's a funny story, I changed the color.
Oh yeah, you're the queen of like putting shitty filters on my nice photos.
No, I did it once. You yelled at me and I didn't do it again.
You even cropped my the ironing board.
I was told to crop the ironing board, but I gave you a heads up. No. But one of the things about what I think about photography is that it's like you can't teach someone a sense of urgency. I used to say it all the time I could teach you how to carry a tray when I taught people at Soho Grand to be a server. I can teach you the basics, but you're not going to have a sense of urgency unless you actually have that innately. So I think that when it comes to photography from the outside looking in and seeing photographers and having friends who are photographers, I think that it's definitely, you can teach them the technique, but I don't think that you can have those moments, the seconds that you pick the camera up.
I mean, the thing with photography too, and what I love about it is, if I go out right now in this area and go on a street corner, destiny is creating my photo. I can't be like, oh, I would love to have a 65-year-old woman with a little poodle holding a baguette under her arm.
Right.
I can't do that. That I would have to be a painter.
Right.
So I'm at the mercy of destiny. I'm at the mercy of the moment. The universe has brought me a lot of those moments.
Yeah.
And so, where I'm like, wow, this is crazy. Like, I can't believe this real thing is right here. And
that's what I was going to ask you. I'm saying, so together, you and I've been very blessed to be in some really unbelievably pinch yourself, holy shit moments. Like in rooms full of people, celebrities and musicians and artists and comedians. And that being said, like with all the things that you've got to see and all the people you've been around, have you had one moment that you're just like, I just can't believe this is my fucking life, or more?
6 days ago, I had the most like, what the fuck moment of my life, I think. Where? So we were talking about the movie Phantom of the Paradise.
Okay.
And so Phantom of the Paradise is a twist on Phantom of the Opera.
Okay.
As a twist on, it's 1974, so it came out when I was 1 year, 1 year old.
3.
Brian De Palma directed.
Okay.
And Paul Williams is the star, the great composer of the Carpenters' We've Only Just Begun, and Barbra Streisand's Evergreen, they co-wrote the Rainbow Connection for the Muppet Show.
Wait, he wrote it?
Yeah, he's my favorite songwriter.
That's my favorite song.
Right, so there you go. So Paul Williams, and so on and so on and so on.
I'm just so glad you said that one song with the rest of them. You put Evergreen and Rainbow
Connection. The guy is like...
Was I in the room with this person?
No.
Okay, good, okay.
So
we were together. I'm wondering where this happened.
One night, I think I was in Miami with Dave. I think it was at the Hard Rock in December, the gigs. And Jeff Ross brought this friend with him, this guy, Steven Kessler. And I see the guy and I'm like, I've seen this face before, right? And so he introduces himself and we start talking, and Like he's like Jeff says, oh, he directs documentaries and things, and I look at him, I was like, are you the guy who directed Still Alive, the Paul Williams documentary, which is my favorite documentary of all time? And because my favorite movie of all time is Phantom of the Paradise with Paul Williams, and it's the greatest. Like, I mean, if you guys have not seen this, go watch it. It's incredible, and it's basically the kind of life of this genius Paul Williams, who's gone through ups and downs with, you know, the industry, as everybody has, and addiction, and has now been sober for 1 million years, and it's just this journey. And every year there's a Phantom, you know, this Phantom of the Paradise is one of the, it's like Rocky Horror Picture Show. Like, you know, I used to go see it in theaters in Paris. I mean, it's like it has a huge cult following. In the original script for this movie, Phantom of the Paradise, which was called Phantom of the Fillmore, I have a copy of the original script. The devil, who's played by my new friend Paul Williams, who we're talking about, is basically, it was the whole thing because the label is called Swan Records, and so Zeppelin's manager preemptively sued them because Swan Song, you know, that's Zeppelin's label, and then the Fillmore was Bill Graham's venue, so he sued. So basically, they had to change the Fillmore to the Paradise. They had to change Swan to Death Records, and then he becomes, you know, he's Swan in the movie, but initially it was going to be Spectre, like a Spectre, like Death Spectre, and that was based on. So they sued. It couldn't happen. They had already filmed the movie, so they had to, back then in '74, digitally change the names of the theater and everything. So, anyways, my favorite movie. The soundtrack's my favorite soundtrack. And so for many, many years, I've had a dream of producing like a, you know, big deluxe anniversary edition of the Phantom of the Paradise soundtrack. So I meet this guy, Steven Kessler. He says, I'm going to try to connect you with Paul. I'm like, oh my God, you know, this is like my ultimate thing. I want to talk to him about this project. He keeps trying to connect us. And then it's just not happening because he can tell, you know, it's not easy to get a hold of Paul. And so it's just, every time he's like, all right, next week we're going to go to lunch with Paul. And it's just not working. And then one day I'm at the Four Seasons Hotel in LA and was nominated for Grammy that day, working with Dave on the Closer. I think that one was the Closer.
You won 3, correct?
Yeah. And I literally, I'm waiting for Grace to come down. It's packed because it's like Grammy day, you know. And the waitress, I said, can I sit over here? She's like, no, this table's reserved. I got to put you on the other side. I'm so sorry. And she like takes me to the other side of the restaurant. I sit down and Paul Williams is like there, like sitting next to me at the other table. And I'm like, I text Steven Kessler, like, Steven, you're not going to believe this, because now for a year he's been trying to connect us and it's just not happening. And he's with his wife and they start talking, and I'm not going to interrupt.
So you don't introduce yourself, you're sitting silently.
No. And then I notice that, you know, like he's like doing a couple like texts under the table or something. So he's a little distracted. And so at one point I'm like, this is my opportunity, because obviously Steven's trying so hard, but so far it's not working. So I said, Mr. Williams, and he says, Paul. I was like, Paul, I just want to introduce myself. And I have this jacket on, but I have a Phantom of the Paradise tattoo right here. So I said, I just wanted to show you this tattoo. He's like, oh man, that's crazy. Da, 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 da. And I said, oh, I'm the guy Steven Kessler's been trying to put you with. And we just start kind of talking. And he's like, well, okay, tell Steven to connect us.
Make it happen, yeah.
But he's being a little bit distant. And I just kept talking, and like somehow whatever I said, I don't remember, because I was starstruck. And I mean, like Taylor Swift could sit on my lap, I wouldn't be starstruck. right. But Paul Williams, I was like, oh my God, we're talking. And whatever I said, he saw the passion, he saw the glow in my eyes. And he said, actually take my number. And I was like,
okay, this is
okay. So and he says, let's get together. We'll get together with Steven, blah, blah. And then I win a Grammy that day. So I texted him that night. I was like, man, you brought me good luck. I knew the second I met you that I was going to win this Grammy today. And
this is still not my holy shit moment.
No, this is not the holy shit moment. So we're just texting.
It's a lot of holy shit moments, though.
No, so we start texting, and I guess he Googled me, and he's like, oh, well, your work is beautiful. We just kind of start talking. Then Steven we finally make a lunch plan. So we all go to lunch last year, I think it was. Yeah, last year we go to sushi.
Were you nervous?
No, because at that point we've been
Okay.
texting and all this stuff. And I just kind of brought some of my memorabilia things. I have a big collection, Phantom of the Paradise. I don't know. I just started saying, hey, man, I've really been wanting to do this thing. And this is what I'm thinking, blah, blah, blah. And then how everything's connected. My friend Harry Weinger, who I was just talking about, who got me started in the label world, designing records. I know that soundtrack was, A&M, which is Universal. So I'd say to Harry, hey, any way to see what's in the vault, for Universal, I want to do this project. And Harry, it took him some time because these things are not easy, He found the master and we had a session and listened to some stuff. That was my first holy shit moment of like, how am I the guy? Just like when I work on this Prince stuff in the past, decade or so, where I'm like, oh my God, I'm sitting in a studio listening to these masters and it's me. There's like millions of fans of this thing, And then fast forward to 6 days ago, we had planned a session for me to play Paul the outtakes. So I'm now the guy playing Paul Williams songs he recorded 52 years ago, the year I was born. I just turned 52. The songs he hasn't heard in 52 years that are his compositions, his recording, and I'm playing him his demos of the songs that are in the movie performed by other, by actors and other singers. And there was a moment I'm playing something and he starts singing to me.
Are you dead?
Let's give it up for Matthew, because and I'm like, and I'm filming it. I have the video, and he's basically saying like, and then, without getting too personal, because it was a personal moment, but at one point he got overwhelmed with emotion because realizing that he had been through, at that time, was into heavy drugs and everything when he made this music, but. There's a song called, it's the Phantom's theme from the movie called Beauty and the Beast. And for some reason, I don't know what, maybe there is no, I don't know, because things just happen that way. When I was in the studio last year listening to the stuff with the engineer, I was like, hey, I'd love to like hear like a stripped down version of this song, like an acoustic. I just want to hear the acoustic guitar and the piano really low and the voice, and for some reason I made this mix, which has nothing to do with the original mix, the original song. So it's just like a created acoustic version. And so he's listening to all this stuff. He's like, wow, wow, wow. And then I said, I just want to play you something weird because, it's just something we had the idea of just doing, but that I'd like to include on the project because it's just so beautiful. He starts listening to that. I can see him just going like literally very deep. And get very emotional, and then when the song stops, he realizes that in his addiction he wrote a song about recovery, which is crazy. Like he saw what was possible, but with the song, and realizes, oh my God, I was already there. This was already here, and this is kind of personal, but I don't think he'd mind me sharing. It's a beautiful and I'm sitting here like, this is my life, like, my idol, one of my idols, and who wrote my favorite soundtrack of all time, is in my favorite film of all time that I have a tattoo, and my whole life I've been, singing these songs, and then I like, and then
that's a holy shit moment for you.
And then looks at me and he's like, man, I think we joked about being soulmates, just like. I can't believe this is happening. And he really had that reverence too. And he had that gratitude. And that's the beautiful thing about Paul is that, through recovery, you just see this, he's like living gratitude. So it makes me want to work even harder on this thing, to have somebody who's such a beautiful human being, just kind of look back on 52 years ago and that somehow, the universe put me there.
That's incredible. I was not expecting that.
And I've been in those places. Like I remember, ending up in like Prince's kitchen at 5 a.m. once in LA, and same thing. I'm like, how am I here right now? Like, how is this possible? And except with Prince, you didn't get emotion. I would say like, hey man, I can't believe I'm here. My whole childhood was like, listening to your music, and he goes, and walks away, So different experience, but so that I would say for me, I was probably was texting my kids and texting Grace, and everybody this is the craziest moment right now for me, because to come from that apartment, my dad's apartment, with being left alone in the house, watching this movie on VHS for the 100th time or whatever.
It's incredible, man.
Flash forward to 46 years, like 45 years later or something, and I'm in the studio with the master tapes with the guy who is in the movie, wrote the songs, it makes me believe in something greater than me.
Yeah.
And that's something I've always struggled with, is like, what's out there? What is this? I'm I always see myself as an agnostic, and then life keeps showing me like how crazy things are, well, maybe, I don't know. There's something guiding all this. Like, this is not just coincidence
it's not
every
happenstance.
time.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then I always think like, and I mean, the millions of times I've said, this is a weird coincidence, and then realizing like, hey, this is weird, and it's like over and over. I mean,
those moments I'm imagining just from outside looking in, there's a lot of, that one's a pretty fucking big one. I don't know if we can come close to that one. I know one of the things about you are the boys, and what an incredible, I know that life-changing moment is becoming a father for you, for sure. They're here now, it was all right. But
we can skip to the next question.
No, but I'm saying I see you. I see the way you light up with them, and it's really it's a beautiful relationship that you have with the two of them. Really.
I mean, it's there's no greater experience.
I don't know. I've heard. I can tell you by
you
watching.
have Oliver.
I have Oliver.
You gave birth to Oliver.
I gave birth to Oliver.
And no, but I mean, that's the thing where I'm 26 years old, and all of a sudden, my son sitting over there is almost the age I was when I had him, which is kind of crazy. But I think that's the spirituality that I know is
you speak
that
of them.
moment.
You speak
that
of
moment
them.
of
the way you just told the story, though, Mathieu. Right. I've talked to you. You speak of them with that type, and I'm not trying
because it's like even I was saying this morning we're having breakfast with my friend Kieran Carnani, who's the one who kind of like pushed me up with Leica in the beginning, and it's been an amazing guiding light of my life. And I was saying, like, this whole week I've been here, I have so much work back home, right? I'm on the road with Dave and all this stuff, and I was like, okay, like this whole week, is me taking time to do the stuff for me and stuff. But the fact that Miles is with me actually made me enjoy the week so much more, because I felt like it's so fun to, like, anytime I can include my kids into what I'm doing, and also he's a photographer now, and it's good for him to like be around, because a big part of, this world is, it is important to be surrounded by, good people who do that and can encourage you, and you can see what you're doing. There's opportunities to shoot. You don't know who you're going to meet and what's going to happen. But for me, it's definitely the driver. It's hard because I'm in a world in the entertainment where I can't work from home, right? So I did have to be away a lot when they were little. When I started touring with Lenny, that's at that time when they were like 6 and 9, and so it was kind of hard, because you're like, well, I want to be home all the time. And at the same time, you're like, well, I want to build something that they can be proud of. And also, I don't want to like ignore my passion, because if I ignore my passion, then I'm going to be resentful. Right. And, you just don't know.
Did you take them with you ever? Did they go on the road?
Yeah, I mean, not in the beginning, because they were little, but it started, I took them to the Bahamas and all this stuff. And obviously, Julian's not as much into this world of photography and everything, but still loves, coming around. When we had the summer camp, during COVID, and he spent all that time, it was just the best time I can ever remember, because Julian, is also like he likes being isolated. He likes being home, and, he likes video games. He likes basketball and football and all this stuff that I don't,
it's completely
I've
opposite.
never done. Yeah, it's like opposite. So it was so much fun to just be together all the time. And there was a moment where like Miles was there, and then Julian was there. And so that's the best part of it, I mean, the meeting your heroes, all that stuff, that's amazing, but this is what makes me the proudest, is like having my kids with me. And literally anytime, like, he went and worked for Jeff Aroff, who I talked about recently, and he works for another friend, Jeff Gold, in LA. And every time people are like texting me like, oh my God, these kids are so amazing. Like, I just love, D-Nice texted me after we hung out a couple of days ago at the Leica thing, and
Yeah.
he texted me, "Yo, Miles is fucking amazing. I love this
That picture
kid."
was fantastic.
But yeah, it's amazing. But what I'm saying is, it's like, it makes me proud, to see that they just blend in to my world and have completely their own identities. We joke all the time about like, oh, Miles is like mini me and all that, because yes, you can tell he's my son, but totally different person, and he's an amazing writer, and he's working on this animation.
Is his eye the same?
His eye is totally unique.
It's different, right?
In the beginning, it was like, in the beginning, I remember thinking, oh, that's funny. That looks kind of like my stuff, and then all of a sudden, it's like his thing clicks in, and then he's doing, and then he'll get excited about it. Like the portrait you talk about, D-Nice, he started photographing everybody like macro,
great.
like that, like fun kind of like,
the shots were
and then within like a day, he's got like 30 of those photos of all different friends and other people that he's just meeting. And so it also kind of keeps it exciting, which is great. And that's really important, because we all tend to get to some like kind of slump moments, where you wonder like, what are you doing it all for? And so to get back to the kids, that's still my driver. It's still my driver to know that not only, yes, you have to like take care of your kids, obviously, and college and this and that and whatever. And, my ex and the house and all the normal things. But for me, it's more important to know that like they're having a good time and can be proud of what I'm doing,
I imagine for sons to be in the world that you get to be in, it's not like you are a still photographer with 30 people on a set.
Right.
It has to be so fun for them. I mean, the world that you're running and the people that you're with and the people that they get to meet, and not just meet, but people who actually love and respect you and are going to be kind, because there are people who aren't so great, you know what I mean?
Right.
People who love and respect you and are kind to your children. I mean, it's I can't imagine anybody be like, oh man, I gotta go do this with my dad again. It's
yeah, no, I mean that's the other thing. It's like, they've also learned, I'm also very lucky because I raised them alone. They didn't have a mother, so it's just all me.
Yeah, it was definitely all you.
When I had to be away for long periods of time, they were with like a superpower of a mother, So it's like, okay, I knew they were okay.
Photographers that I know, there's kind of a very kind of a relaxed energy with a photographer, though in the midst of when things get busy and it starts to get crazy, that's when the camera comes out. It's almost like this tiny bit, that is a little bit of a separation between you and this person that you're taking the picture of, and it's a way of kind of not as social as you might be. It's also a tad bit removed from being part of it. Do you think that that's true for yourself or photographers you know?
That's probably 90% of a successful photographer, and working with the people we work with, is knowing when to shoot and when not to shoot. There's times where we go back to, I was talking about instinct.
Yeah.
I try to base everything on instinct, and it took me a long time to actually listen to my instinct, but there's been times when I have a camera and it's around my neck. Funny enough, it's like the first time in a long time I don't have a camera around my neck because it's on your table over there, but I have a camera around my neck and something tells me, keep it down, like don't take the picture. And it's the devil on my shoulder is like, take the photo. This is going to be a valuable moment, and blah, blah, blah. And then I'm like, but then the instinct on my left shoulder is telling me not to, so I'm going to listen to that. A lot of young photographers have a really hard time putting the camera down or accepting like, okay, I've just taken those photos, and especially if it's an intimate moment, I just follow my instinct. Like if I know I've got a picture, I don't need, especially if it's intimate, shots. I don't need 100 of Dave and Travis Scott in his dressing room at his club in Ohio. If I know I got a good one, that's
I feel
good.
like you should take more shots of me then.
Yeah, I've taken a lot of you.
So part of my show, we have a thing called hot flashes. So I'm going to ask you some questions.
Are you having hot flash right now?
I'm having hot flashes all the time. So if you could photograph anybody dead or alive, one person, who would it be?
Jack White.
What are your 3 favorite album covers of all time?
Sign of the Times, Prince, Inner Vision, Stevie Wonder, Blind Faith.
Because he was an early inspiration, and though I know you know a lot and you have a lot of musicians that you love, can you tell me 3 Prince songs that are your favorite?
If I Was Your Girlfriend from Sign of the Times.
Great song.
The Ladder from Around the World in a Day.
Love The Ladder.
And Sometimes It Snows in April from Parade.
Okay, so we're going to do Fuck, Marry, Kill.
Oh,
LA,
God.
New York, Paris.
Fuck Paris, marry New York, kill LA.
Okay.
And I live in LA, but that's
What is your favorite city in the world for food?
Tokyo.
Do you have a favorite restaurant in Tokyo?
No, I don't even remember the name of the restaurant.
Do you have a favorite restaurant in any other city? Like
Asanebo Sushi in LA.
What do you have coming up next? Like, what are you looking forward to before we are finished?
New vinyl with Dave, which should be exciting. So I can't really say anything yet.
Nope.
And then this Phantom of the Paradise thing, which we're working on. It's not like done or official, but it's being worked on. I have a whole new idea for a new book and a new show. Yeah,
lots of stuff.
Yeah. Other things, other projects that I'm going to produce with a label called Coda. That's an amazing vinyl label, which we're working on the Phantom thing, and so I mean, it's unfortunately in my work, I can't talk about projects that I'm working on. So I'm trying to come up with the maybes.
Okay, but you have a lot of stuff happening. But
I have a lot of stuff happening. Paris Blues, the book. That's
bestseller.
We didn't really talk to that. It's been doing really well. We had the show in LA, which had 1,000 people. We had the show in New York, we had over 1,000 people, which is crazy.
Amazing.
And all my friends showed up, and at a book signing yesterday, all my friends showed up except you. And
that's so much up. I worked all weekend.
But this book.
That is his book.
This is my baby. So that's we're gonna take the show.
And we can look online at the Candy Tea Man at
and Amazon
Netflix.
And all that.
But to find
but Paris Blues, I'm figuring out where it's gonna go next. Okay. What city, and we'll do more book signings, and then I'm gonna start on this new project.
Really happy to have you here. I'm so glad to know more, and I'm gonna have many fucking questions when we're not on camera and I'm not being timed.
I know, I'll probably be like, oh damn, I didn't talk about this.
I've come back. I mean, seriously, this was great. I'm really, really happy to have you.
Thank you. It was fun. A lot of fun.
Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Please subscribe and review wherever you watch my podcast. Please come back. I'll see you next week. I appreciate you. Thank you. Hey guys, thank you so much for showing up for another episode of Still Can't Cook. Subscribe to us wherever you listen to your podcasts, on YouTube or any other podcast provider. And if you're on Instagram or TikTok, please follow us at Still Can't Cook. Love to have you guys back every week. So happy that you joined us and look forward to seeing you next week.